Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm John Bradford, Chairman of the Camber Parish Council. We're here tonight participating in this public meeting.
Who told who they were a fucking psychopath?
Is someone cutting across me?
Who told who they were a fucking psychopath?
I can't hear what's being said, Deborah.
Employees. Oh, okay, sorry, I was a bit quiet. Oh, sorry.
I don't know who that was, but anyway, welcome, whoever you are. We're in this public meeting held in a unique Teams format for the very first time in Camber. We asked Rother District Council for the meeting with key members of RADCOP following many concerns and criticisms raised by Camber residents of the planning and effectiveness since the Maybank holiday. And Rother District Council readily agreed to this, and I must thank them for the organisation they put into this meeting. I trust tonight will provide the answers to the questions you have raised and give the clarity you seek on RADCOP management arrangements for this year. We do anticipate the meeting will finish by 8 p.m. Let me hand you now over to our MP, Sally Ann Hart, who will be chairing tonight's meeting and who will firstly undertake the introductions. Sally Ann.
Thank you, John. And could I just ask everyone who's not speaking to go on mute, and that will make it easier and we won't get noise in the background. So that I'd be very grateful for that. Just briefly, I was district councillor for Camber from 2015, and we all know that parking and antisocial behaviour are long-standing and ongoing issues in Camber, and especially at peak times in the summer months. And there's normally about 15 days of the year where we've had these really horrendous days with, you know, cars, traffic coming down. And the village becomes, home to large numbers of vehicles and visitors to the beach. But actually, what has been more recent, I think really since lockdown measures were lifted last year, is not just the number of cars, but the antisocial parking and the antisocial behaviour of visitors to Camber, which actually is really awful. And it's not just to residents in Camber, it's the behaviour towards the coastal officers, our police, and the general people who help on the beach, the lifeguards and things. So like all of you, I am fed up with the disrespectful scenes of visitors abusing local residents, dropping litter, sometimes using people's gardens as public conveniences, as well as antisocial parking. And we're all used to seeing queues of traffic backed up along the road to Rye and towards the Kent Ditch. So over the years, Rother has done so many things with East Sussex in terms of try and solve the traffic and other safety issues. We've got lifeguards at the beach from those terrible tragic drownings in 2016. There was a traffic impact study to investigate how we could reduce the traffic issues, implementing many of the recommendations. Some of them haven't worked, and engaging with numerous statutory organisations, Highways England. So there's a huge amount that we've done. There is probably still more we can do, and we can talk about that during this session. But I think what I want to do now is just to say that your parish council, your district councillors, Rother, East Sussex, we've all worked incredibly hard to try and sort these problems. And, we'd welcome suggestions from members of the public at some point to see if they've got suggestions, if there's ways we can improve it for you. But I think, first of all, I'm going to pass over. We've got Deborah Keneally here from Rother District Council. We've got Chris Farrell from Sussex Police. So I think, Deborah, am I going to pass over to you first? Or am I pass? Yes. OK, I'm going to pass you over to Deborah, who's going to explain a bit about Rother, what it's done and what it's doing at the moment. So thank you so much, and I'll come back in a minute. You're on mute, Deborah.
Oops, I thought I'd come off a classic. Apologies for that. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. And thank you, Sally Ann. I'm head of services for neighbourhood services, and part of my remit is the wonderful Camber Sands Beach and the coastal line for Rother District Council. And I'm going to talk quite a lot this evening, so I do apologise in advance because many people from Camber have submitted lots of questions and comments and suggestions, all of which I thank you very much for and are very welcome. And I'm going to try and answer those questions as part of my update to you on Operation RADCOP and all the work that goes on behind the scenes to support Camber residents, the village and our visitors. So to start with, Rother District Council very much appreciates the impact that large numbers of visitors have on the village, local residents, businesses, and indeed Camber staff and our contractors. And we put at the forefront the very safety of all concerned. And as we all know, and as Sally Ann referred to, none of these issues are new. I spoke to a local farmer some weeks ago regarding park and ride facility, and he made reference when we were talking to it being like this all of his life for some 60 years or so. And also to the lady who wrote into us to say she has heard before what we can and can't do, and she's frustrated and fed up like we all are, and she doesn't wish to hear it again. I'm very sorry to say that we have not come here today with all the answers to what is a very complex problem. However, myself and my colleagues here have come today to address some of your questions and explain what we are doing and the changes that have been made, and to listen to your concerns and ideas. So to start with, what has Rother Council been doing? Well, I personally have been attending regular Cabinet Office, beaches and tourism meetings held by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. These update meetings started in early April and related basically to the impact of lifting COVID lockdown restrictions. And I've been attending these meetings to raise the various concerns associated with that. And it has given me the opportunity to raise firsthand specific issues relating to Camber, particularly concerning road traffic congestion and the issue of parking fines being too low and ineffective, which is one of the questions I've been asked. What can we do about the level of parking fines? So I have raised that specifically with the Cabinet Office, and also the lack of ability to effect planned road closures more quickly and easily. So they have assured me that this is being reported back up at a higher level for consideration, and I'm informed that these will be taken into account and reviewed. It will require consultation and any proposed changes to legislation. So I do hope, and I do look forward to updates from the Cabinet Office on these items in the future, but it's not going to be a quick and easy fix, I'm afraid. In the meantime, we have also fed back to the Cabinet Communications Office our experience on the ground, and they are supporting with UK-wide communications on all aspects of increased visitor numbers, including the impact of litter, parking and the traffic congestion. In answer to other questions you sent in regarding ownership and responsibility, Rother is responsible for the management of the beaches and the 3 Camber car parks which they own, as they come under our jurisdiction. Highways England are responsible for the A259, and the responsibility for the roads network into and around Camber, and now for the on-street parking, is with East Sussex County Council. And Dale and Dan, who are with us this evening, will talk about these aspects in more detail later on. East Sussex County Council also owns small sections of the beach, along with the whole of the sand dunes, which Rother litter pick on their behalf. With regards some of your questions on costs, the cost to Rother for managing the beach operations is considerable. Rother gains revenue from the car parks, and on busy days, people observe Western Car Park filling up and believe that this generates lots of surplus income for Rother. But in fact, it doesn't. By the time we have covered our contribution towards the costs for the RNLI and additional police support, costs for RDC staff, maintenance of the car parks, signage, waste contractors, toilets, and I could go on and on, there is very little left for anything else. And remember that Western Car Park remains empty and unused for much of the winter and on poor weather days in the summer. So, you know, it's not a revenue generating stream that where monies go off elsewhere. It is just to cover Camber and the village and the area and the operational management of it. Just to remind ourselves as well, and to get things into proportion, these peak visitor days only usually account for perhaps 8 to 10 days per season. I say only cautiously because obviously they do have a huge impact. Now, this may have increased during 2020 and 2021 due to COVID, but it remains to be seen if this trend will continue into next year. And just to finish, Rother are also responsible for litter management of the beaches, the dunes, car parks and the village, and for the maintenance and operation of the toilets. So to go on to Operation RADCOP, as we do each year, Rother works closely with our much valued Operation RADCOP partners, leading on many operational aspects, including our RADCOP meetings, and planning for the areas that Rother District Council are responsible for. Alongside the welfare of residents and staff, the most important aspect of RADCOP is beach and water safety. And to facilitate planning, we use a red, amber, green rating system, otherwise known as the RAG rating system, to attempt to predict visitor numbers 5 days in advance. And this is based also on temperatures in London, weather, local weather and the tidal range. We're very conscious that many of our visitors on peak days come from various parts of the UK, including London, and they will look at their weather outside their window and make a decision whether to drive to the beach or not. It may be quite different weather in Camber, but that's the way it works. Now, the RAG system is not perfect as weather patterns change, but it's usually a good indicator that we can work from. And we issue the RAG warnings on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays to all our RADCOP partners to assist forward planning of resources. And as it is now the peak holiday season, we are now meeting at least weekly to review operations and assess our forward plans. And we feel it's important that as many people as possible understand the roles that each partner plays in Operation RADCOP, which was originally established to focus on beach and water safety, but has since widened this year to include much valued regular input from East Sussex County highways and road management teams. So this is a positive indication of the work that has already been achieved in improving safety aspects, but also the desire to really make a difference where possible to the traffic congestion. As a reminder, and as Sally Ann referred to earlier, a Camber traffic and parking study was completed by consultants back in 2017. And with the exception of additional parking, all of their conclusions have been implemented, including matrix signs, removal of pay on entry into car parks and civil parking enforcement to varying degrees of success. Whilst the proposition may sound attractive, it is felt that additional parking facilities would attract yet more visitors. And we feel that for safety reasons, the beach is currently operating at full capacity on these peak days. We really don't want to wish to encourage more visitor numbers to the beach, and which would also put more strain on the village and the residents. So who does what in Operation RADCOP? Rother District Council employs coastal operations officers all year round and car park and beach patrol staff during the summer. The coastal team works with our partners to make visitors' experience at Camber Sands Beach as safe and enjoyable as possible. The coastal operations officers act as a central hub on the beach. They do all the safety flag raising and lowering. They maintain all the assets on the beach, such as life-saving equipment and life buoys. They carry out daily beach patrols. And I'm just giving you a few of the things that they do because I'm conscious I could go on forever. But they also deliver pre-arrival education in the form of social media messages and website information. And that's linked in with our fantastic comms team who do a lot of communications for us as far as possible and as widely as possible across the UK. And they administer first aid when necessary. And they oversee the beach patrol staff and the car park attendants. There's numerous other things, very important jobs that they do as well, but that gives you a flavour. They are not required to go into the water. That's a very important aspect. They are very much beach and car park based. The beach patrols, similarly, work in the summer season only. They work on the land only and do not enter the water. And they also help with flying the sea safety flags, maintaining beach life-saving equipment. They carry out daily beach patrols on foot, and they advise people as they go about those patrols on barbecues and litter and such things. They also assist with managing the children's wristband system to try and reunite any lost children with their families. And they help with meeting visitors on arrival at the beach with face-to-face information on tide times and about the safety of the beach and the varying levels of the sand spits and how people can get caught out on those. So a very important role. And then the Camber car park attendants, they support the 3 car parks in Camber, opening and closing the gates, helping cars get parked up properly in Camber Western Car Park. They support the correct use of the payment machines, provide, again, face-to-face information and advice to our visitors. They'd help with diverting traffic when the car park becomes full, and assist with the highway signs and the VMS signs and informing visitors when Camber is full. Sussex Police, we work very closely with the Sussex Police, fantastic support we get from them. I'm going to leave Chris Farrell to talk through the detail of the role that they perform, but they do scheduled Operation RADCOP deployments, particularly when a day is risk assessed as a red day. That's our peak visitor predictions, and they deploy strength to support us locally. So as I say, I'll let Chris enlarge upon their role later on in this meeting as to what they can and they can't do. Our other partners are South East Coast Ambulance Service. They provide a single responder paramedic to either the Camber or the Rye area. And it's important to emphasise here that the South East Coast Ambulance generally has a paramedic tethered to the village beach on these peak busy days to facilitate a quick response to incidents. And they're there for both the beach and in the village. And this is in recognition that on these peak days, it is difficult to get the ambulance down the road, which can be congested. So this is a bonus because this is over and above the normal resourcing for Hastings and Rother areas. So this is additional support. Now, it's not guaranteed because obviously if they get a call elsewhere, they have to go off to it. But 9 times out of 10, they are there to support us on the beach and in the village for emergency calls in the Camber and Rye area. And they provide us with a fantastic service. So they support us with beach and medical trauma incidents, including remote triage and self-deployment to assist with clinical intervention where necessary. And they liaise with the Air Ambulance, Kent and Surrey and Sussex, and partner agencies to coordinate high acuity patient treatment and transport. And they support partner agencies, us, with shared situational awareness of events, activities or incidents that may restrict either the inward or outward flow of visitors to Camber. And they prioritise trauma incidents. So invaluable help to us. And then we have the RNLI who support us on the beach. And we have an area life-saving manager who leads on effective life-saving service for our area, the lead lifeguard supervisor who's on the beach at Camber, seasonal lifeguard supervisors, and then the lifeguard operations assistants to support the smooth running and efficient management of the lifeguard service. And then we have the senior lifeguards and the seasonal lifeguards. And we have 2 towers on Camber Beach, both operational now that we are into the peak season because of the children's school holidays. And they are staffed in accordance with that. Our other partners are East Sussex Fire and Rescue Service, and they have volunteers when they're available to support by engaging with members of the public. So they come down to the beach and they talk to visitors as they arrive. They have a water safety gazebo, which is printed with messages regarding beach safety and beach flag meanings. They set this up at the main entrance to the beach with volunteers and staff available to support the education of adults and parents around the risks associated with water and educate children and young people about the dangers of entering the water. So they support very much in that respect. They also help with supplying and distributing wristbands for children and young people and giving out safety leaflets and obviously receiving and responding to 999 calls when required. We also have this year as a new support service, we've had the, oh my gosh, the name has gone from me, the pastors, the street pastors.
Street pastors.
Yes, the street pastors, thank you. They have very kindly come on board this year to volunteer on these peak days to talk to people and help distribute wristbands as well to the children and speak to the visitors. So their help has been invaluable too. We also have Her Majesty's Coast Guard, who also help us with and the RNLI with emergency calls and where necessary, water rescues. This includes the mobilisation, organisation and tasking of adequate resources to respond to persons either in distress at sea or to persons at risk of injury or death on the cliffs. So again, a very excellent support to have there. And then we have East Sussex County Council's parking teams now. Again, this is a new team that Dan is managing, and I'm going to leave Dan to talk a little bit more about what the East Sussex County Council's parking enforcement team are doing and how they are operating. And as I mentioned earlier, we have also been joined more now by East Sussex County Council road and traffic management teams, which is very welcome. Just as an aside, in a recent incident, Martin Watson, our partner from South East Coast Ambulance Service, reported this week that a medical support ambulance was on the scene within 90 seconds in Camber Village due to the support that they have tethered at Operation RADCOP. So that's just an example, a recent example of how well they can support us and how we gain from having that extra support down in Camber. So that's a very brief overview of the different roles that people help us with on the beaches and managing the car parks and the access to the beaches. So you might say, what are we doing differently this year? Well, aside of Operation RADCOP, we have worked with BIFA, our waste contractor, to review operations at Camber since last year and last season. This year, BIFA has extended the hours the operatives can work in the evenings to facilitate the removal of litter off the beach up until dusk. And this was one of the questions, another one of the questions that we have been asked as well. So they have changed their operational hours. However, it has always been the case that due to the sand, we are not able to wheel the containers full of rubbish off the beach. So they have always used a tractor to drive along the beach, pick up out of each container large ton hippo bags full of refuse and deposit these bags into a transfer vehicle to take to Western Car Park. And in order to do this safely, the beach has to be clear of people along the tractor path. And unfortunately, on peak visitor days, the beach can still have perhaps up to 10,000 people on it until maybe 9 p.m. And this can make it difficult, even then, for the containers to be emptied safely. So the operatives discuss a dynamic risk assessment with the coastal officers in the evening to decide, based on the tide, where the tide is on the beach and the numbers of people still on the beach, and they make a decision whether they feel they can safely drive the tractor onto the beach in the evenings to empty the containers. If it's agreed that that can't happen, they may focus their efforts elsewhere, litter picking and things, but it does mean that we're back to clearing the beach from very early the next morning. And as I'm sure some of you have observed and know, they start perhaps 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning to try and empty as much of the litter as they can. And they always focus first on the beach because, again, we don't want the litter swept into the sea. We want to avoid that as much as possible. But it's not easy. It's not an easy task by any means. In addition, this year we have agreed extra containers to be placed along the beach, and we have invested in metal containers to prevent or try and avoid accidental litter bin fires. We have also gained key access to ramps serving the seawall at Broom Hill, so Biffa can drive along the seawall and service the Broom Hill area more easily and quickly. Because again, this is an area that can become very congested, making it very difficult for Biffa to empty the bins and street cleanse. I think that's all really about the litter. We did discuss with Biffa about bringing the containers off the beach completely, but it would mean really filling up Camber Central Car Park with lots of litter containers. People are generally not prepared to walk their litter very far. So we did consider that idea and decided it would probably not work very well. So we have increased the number of containers on the beach. That's not to say we couldn't review that in time to come, but that was the decision we have taken so far. We were successful in gaining a grant for additional litter bins in Rother, and we are waiting for these to be delivered. And I had hoped by now that you would all be saying, oh, wonderful, Camber Village has got lots more litter bins. But sadly, it has taken much longer for them to arrive due to a shortage of concrete, which some of you may know about in the building industry, because these are concrete-based bins, and supplier staffing. But having chased, we are told that they are coming in soon, and once in, a certain number will be deployed to Camber Village. And we have been asking the parish and people for ideas of where they like them to go, where they most want them to go. So feedback from the village and the parish is very welcome there. What else has Rother done? So we've increased the number of coastal officers to increase support both at Bexhill and at Camber, to increase cover there. We've increased first aid training this year, so our beach patrol are more highly qualified this year. We have employed security guards to assist with antisocial behaviour, particularly in support of our staff and contractors who are struggling to close car parks and divert traffic to try and keep the traffic moving. We have increased the speed of entry into car parks through the removal of payment at kiosks. It gets the cars off the road and into the car parks more quickly, but it hasn't really made any difference to the congestion on the roads. It just means the car parks fill up earlier. But people can pay and display, and they can use Ringo, so it is a good customer service option as well. We are now participating in the new UK-wide Beach Check UK app, and this enables us to provide live updates 3 times per day or more if we wish on the numbers of people on beaches. And my coastal officers are reporting that they do feel that this is having an impact. It's only early days yet. This app only went live in July this year. So it's very new to the UK public. And we need to get it out there and broadcast it. The people who are supplying the app are doing that. And we hope it will catch on, be downloaded and consulted before people leave for the beach. And hot off the press, this week, we've just heard the news that to add to this, the provider has informed us that the car park aspect of the app is now available. So we will now be able to give live updates on the app with the approximate number of available parking spaces throughout the day. So again, this is all to try and educate people to check first, what's it like, how many people on the beach, how many spaces, can they get parked, and to make that decision, do they still want to come? As I mentioned earlier, we've been delighted to have representatives join us in recent meetings from the East Sussex County Council Road Safety Team and the East Sussex Highways Team and the Highways England team, who have all been very supportive in looking into traffic congestion aspects, and we very much welcome their ideas and input into possible improvements to reduce congestion. As I mentioned earlier, East Sussex County Council has introduced civil parking enforcement, and Dan will speak more about this in a little while. But in answer to some more questions that people posed, a few people mentioned this. Yes, ROTHA has researched park and ride options and pre-booking systems for parking. And we have sought experiences on these aspects from other local authorities. And pre-booking is not considered to be of benefit to Camber due to the challenge of informing and encouraging people, A, to use the system before they even leave and be aware of it, B, the nature of the surface at Camber Western Car Park not facilitating numbering and clear white lining. We do white line it, but they don't last very long because of the weather and the nature of the sand and the surface. And really the impact of delays, because we would have to check people into the car park. And if they didn't have a booking, we would have to turn them around and send them back again. And again, that's reintroducing further delays into the car park. So we don't feel at this stage that that is of any benefit to Camber. With regards to the park and ride system, again, it's not considered to be a deterrent to people driving into the village and parking just anywhere, unless, and only unless, perhaps it operates in conjunction with a road closure at A259 junction. It may be possible to relook at this aspect for next year, but the main issue remains of people's willingness to load all their personal items onto a bus, the bus being able to get them down to the beach and back again in a timely manner, the number of buses required on these peak days to transport up to and in excess of 10,000 people in one day, buses that would sit doing nothing on less busy days or if the weather changed. It is not like providing a park and ride for a shopping centre or a resort where there are many different attractions for varying weather days. People only come to Camber for the beach on a nice, warm, sunny days and for the sand dunes. And because it's sunny and sandy, and it's the only sandy beach. And as we all know, the weather can change. We try to predict it, but we're not perfect on that. We are, however, in contact with Folkestone and Hythe Council, who are trialling Park and Ride this year, and it will be interesting to see how they get on. But again, as I say, they offer a very different attraction to Camber Sands, but we don't wish to rule anything out for future consideration. Moving on from there, one of the questions asked also is what is the safe limit for numbers of people on the beach? The answer to this is largely dependent on tide, tidal ranges and weather conditions. High tide during the day squeezes large numbers of people into a much smaller space and pushes others into the dunes. Low tide days enable more people to spread out. People also tend to congregate around the nearest access points. So you tend to get large bubbles or groups of people and then quite wide gaps. I guess in an ideal world, we would probably not wish more than 15,000 visitors, which would include pontins and the holiday caravan occupants, as this would mean less congestion on the roads as well as on the beaches. We feel this would probably be the most manageable number. On peak days, we estimate we may get 20,000 plus visitors, including pontins and the holiday caravans. And so we would not wish to inadvertently encourage more visitors than this by increasing parking spaces, or indeed potentially park and ride offering. As can be seen from other areas such as Bournemouth, we have little ability to prevent people from coming to the beach at present. I think that's really all I wanted to say at this moment in time, but I shall now hand over to Dan to speak about civil parking enforcement. But before I do, I just want to thank again those residents who submitted your ideas and questions. And if we haven't covered off your questions in this meeting, then we will be happy to get in touch and do so. So over to Dan, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah, and good evening, everybody. As Deborah said, parking enforcement is under the responsibility of East Sussex, and I'm Dan Clark, I'm the parking team manager. We're responsible for the enforcement of the on-street restrictions, and we manage this through our enforcement contractor, NSL Services. All the restrictions in Camber are enforceable under the Traffic Management Act 2004. This gives civil enforcement officers the powers to issue penalty charge notices to vehicles in contravention. The Traffic Management Act also sets out what actions we can take, the charge level, so the level that the PCN is issued at, which is either a higher level, which is £70, or a lower level at £50. This is discounted for a period of 14 days once the PCN has been issued, but this has also been set by central government. Each contravention, so each vehicle in contravention or each contravention will have a specific requirement which CEOs need to check before they can issue a PCN. They need to ensure that the lining, signage is all correct. They need to check the extent of the highway and to make sure they can issue the PCN. And in most circumstances, they need to observe the vehicle in that location for a number of minutes. Usually for yellow lines, it would be 5 minutes, and other restrictions can be shorter. The main restrictions are in Camber are double yellow lines. So yellow lines extend from the centre of a carriageway to the extent of the highway boundary. So any vehicles that are parked beyond yellow lines on paths or verges can be enforced as long as it's on the highway area. The clearway, which runs which is on Lyd Road between Camber Sands Holiday Park and the Orca campsite, can only be enforced when a vehicle is actually parked on the carriageway, not when it's beyond it. Drop curbs. So residential drop curbs, civil enforcement officers can enforce the drop curbs whether there is yellow lines or what we call an access protection marking, which is the white line across the drop curb. For CEOs to enforce this contravention, the property owner needs to contact the enforcement team on the 01273 335500 option 1 number. If there is no answer, you will need to leave a message with your name and contact number for a CEO to attend. The CEO will attend and assess whether they're able to issue a PCN. They are only able to issue PCNs if access is blocked. So where there are no restrictions, CEOs cannot issue a PCN. There is no current legislation outside of London that against vehicles parking on pavements. CEOs also can't issue PCNs for dangerous parking, obstruction, or parking too close to a junction. A number of the questions that we had were around removal of vehicles or clamping. We are limited to the actions that we can take with the restrictions that are currently in Camber. Where we have looked at what we could possibly do to look at to remove vehicles, but it does raise a number of other issues when doing that. Removal of vehicles isn't a very quick and easy job. Often in other areas where they do remove vehicles, the removal lorries can cause more congestion than they are trying to fix. The cars would need to be relocated to an accessible location to be placed in. And we've also found in other areas where tow trucks actually get stuck in the traffic that they're trying to assist with. As with other partners, the level of resources allocated to Camber depend on the RAG rating for the day. On the days identified as red, we allocate a minimum of 3 CEOs all day. This will be through either AM and PM shifts or CEOs working throughout the day in those areas. On amber days, 1 CEO will be assigned to Camber with additional CEOs in the area if necessary to move in and help. We also continually monitor the deployment and look to make adjustments where necessary. One of the questions we had, whether there was a limit on the number of PCNs issued. The CEOs, if a vehicle is in contravention and observed by a CEO, they are expected to issue a PCN and will follow as long as it is in contravention and they follow the observation periods. I believe that's all from me. I'm passing on to Chris.
Hello there, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. So I'll explain who I am. I'm Chris Barrell. I'm the Robber District Inspector for Sussex Police. So I cover 32 ward parish areas and my team works out of Battle. So we cover Bexhill and surrounding, Ryan surrounding and Battle and surrounding villages up to the Kent border, including Camber, but not exclusive to. In terms of the reason for this meeting, is, in terms of yourselves, you've come forward with some public concerns, and rightly, we as a partnership want to come forward to you and say, look, this is what we're doing in partnership in order to meet the ever-growing responsibilities rightly within the Operation RADCOP process and procedures. But there are some very clear elements that are causing more alarm, harassment and distress to you as residents than other elements will be. And those elements do specifically relate to traffic, road congestion and illegal parking, and we're aware of that. So it's a case of me going through some elements with you from a policing perspective, what we can or can't achieve within legislation, within restrictions, what our capacity is on the days within Operation RADCOP, and also to mirror the work that Daniel and Deborah have talked about in terms of the exceptional work that's being conducted in partnership within Operation RADCOP. There's an absolute acceptance from the partnership that we need to get better in terms of our communication towards you all as members of the community. And that's something that we've worked on tirelessly this year. John hopefully will mirror this, that we brought John into the strategic and operational meetings in order to ensure that transparency in what we're doing, and also to get that public voice across to us if there are things that we miss. We don't live in Camber, and you do, so you will live with those issues and those problems and those threats and risks. So it's about you coming forward and being able to articulate those so that we can explore them. What I'm going to do is, before I do go any further, I'm just going to read an element. I know you've had a lot of people talking at you, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to read an element, talk through a few bits of what we can and can't achieve, what our core responsibilities are, and then try and whistle through some questions so you've got an opportunity. I can see the clock ticking down to 8 o'clock. So I'm just going to read an extract very briefly, because I think it's really important to. It contains a really nice sandy beach surrounded by National Trust land, but is located at the bottom of a small affluent village. In fact, there are only 3 access roads to the beach. Complaints relate to lack of access, inconsiderate parking, littering and antisocial behaviour. hold weekly agency meetings throughout the peak times. There's only around 3,500 parking spaces for about 15,000 cars. It's not possible to extend this as a lot of the land is private or protected. There is no nearby location for park and ride. Also, due to the British weather, it is hit or miss and very difficult to operate financially. The nearest train stations are a long distance away, therefore people will not utilise this service. The parking fine is not enough to deter people. The local authority and ourselves can issue 100 to 220 tickets a day, and the general view of the public is that they're happy to pay it because it's cheaper than other car parks, and especially if you're coming from the metropolitan. Due to the geographical area, it isn't possible to remove enough vehicles. Tow trucks cannot freely get in and out in order to achieve this, and also tow trucks are not in great enough numbers to be able to achieve that goal. The coastline is surrounded by beautiful sand dunes and areas making it ideal to gather and out of sight. An increase in illegal UMEs, mind us, the police, we like to do that, unlicensed music events and raves, are very difficult for us to manage and labour intensive in peak times. So what I'm reading to you all there is an extract from a beach in Merseyside from a conversation that we've had recently, but anybody would read that and listen to it and read it as Camber Sands. And the point I'm trying to make here is that what you have sitting in front of you is a passionate, driven, multi-agency team who are looking at every element and aspect of Operation RADCOP and the response to you as members of the community and the response to the visitors to the beach in order to keep everybody safe. There are elements that we accept that aren't where we want them to be, and those elements are the elements, sadly, that are visible to you as members of the community. So what we're trying to say is that when you step over the dunes onto the beach, we've talked about the threat, risk and harm to visitors on the beach, the water safety risks, the sand dune risks, the sand collapse hole training that we do, the emergency risks in relation to health, fire and various other elements. Missing children, we get on average 14 missing people a day on a hot summer's day, which has to be managed. We brought the pastors in to support us. I'm not going to go through all the work that has been spoken about by Deborah. What you as visitors and members of the community will see on a Red Rag Day more likely will be this side of the dunes, the roads, the traffic congestion, the trying to get in and out of the car parks, the tailback all the way across onto the A-roads, sometimes across to the motorways. What Merseyside also go on to say is that some visitors have known to travel over 100 miles and even queue several hours onto a motorway miles from the beach. So what we did approximately 7 to 8 months ago is we took a pause in time, a moment in time. I came into the role and we all sat, Deborah, myself and the partners, and we said, let's have a look, an analytical look at what we've got, what we need to achieve and where we need to go. And we took our time to look around the key priorities, including missing people and how we can support and bolster that service, road congestion, and also looking at illegal parking. You've heard from Daniel here about what we can or can't achieve in relation to illegal parking, but what you've not heard necessarily enough about is what we can or can't achieve in relation to road closures and the issues and risks that those bring. Sussex Police, for many years, there's comments from various residents, I'm not going to name names, when I look at the keyword search for police within the Q&As, it's very much a similar theme. So I'm going to cover this off now in relation to closing the road, when we should close the road, what we've done in previous years. Sussex Police, because Operation RADCOP cannot in law be defined as an event, no dissimilar to any other beach across the UK on the coastal strips, it doesn't fall within the event legislation. So it doesn't fall within Civil Contingencies Act, subsection 1, which means that there's certain pieces of legislation that we cannot use within road closures. The only two legitimate pieces of legislation that Sussex Police can use are common law powers for emergency reasons and section 67, subsection 1 of the Road Traffic Regulations Act, which looks at extraordinary circumstances. An example of exceptional circumstances is a road traffic collision, a car on its roof, or something, a horse running out from a field into the road, something that could not be predicted, something that just happens here and there, and the officers need to shut the road in order to deal with that incident. Highways England will always say their number one strapline, as anyone can Google it on the internet, is keep the roads flowing. So we always have to look at what we've got on the road, deal with it within the legislation that's available, and then keep the roads flowing. The only second piece of legislation that we have available to us is section 67, subsection 1, Road Traffic Regulations Act. You don't want me to go through the legislation in fine detail, but that falls within extraordinary circumstances. An example provided within the case law is a jury in court, judge, say there's a murder, jury in court, and the judge directs the jury to go to the scene in a road, for example, where it occurred, in order to witness the scene and have a fuller understanding as a jury before they go back to court. That's extraordinary circumstances, and there we can apply for local authority and we can shut the road for that period of time to allow the jury to conduct that. What it doesn't allow for is a predictable red rag day, which we can predict as coming up. So what that means is, in a nutshell, that we've been utilising legislation in order to shut roads that we really shouldn't have been utilising. And what that does, it doesn't just put the organisation at risk, it puts the individuals at risk. So if a PCSO shuts that road for all the right reasons to support you as a community, we've then got to cater for the well-being of every single person on that tail back to the motorway. We've also got to look at the displacement into other areas, Fairlight, Pett and various other areas, and the risks that that causes and those risks that are concerned. People come to Camber and we've conducted, I don't think we've touched enough on the messaging. We've conducted all sorts of messaging through exploring Facebook messaging, looking at specific communities to message with through Facebook. You can filter down to specific communities. We've looked at messaging on petrol pumps as you go through into Camber. We've looked at messaging in London. The reality is that, and one of the questions says this, doesn't matter what we do within VMS boards, what we do in relation to paper, leaflets, people see the sunshine, they get in their cars with their families and off they come to Camber or various other beaches across the UK. We're the 6th busiest beach. We're not the busiest beach in the UK, but we're up there. When they land in Camber, they often get hit by the traffic queues, and a lot of those elements we've picked apart, the national apps coming in and various other elements coming in to support that. But what we can't do, the police, is shut the road utilising those two powers, the only two powers that we have in place, unless something really serious happens. So what I'm not saying to you is that we were not going to use it full stop. What we can't do is use it as a regular road closure on a red rag day. If, for example, something happens in Camber Sands, a medical emergency or similar, and we need to shut the road because of that circumstance, then absolutely we will. There's no doubt we'll utilise our legislation. So off the back, I would say back in May now, I went out on the ground. It was a red rag weekend. It wasn't my working weekend. I saw the sun was shining. I saw the red rag come through. And as the strategic lead for Sussex Police, Rotherham District Council, it was only right that I physically go out on the ground on a red rag weekend and see exactly what it is you're all talking about as members of the community. So I landed on the ground, and I'm with you, it was horrendous. And I can see exactly what you're saying firsthand in relation to the issues and concerns around road traffic management, which is why Deborah very kindly, very quickly launched what we call a task and finish group with partner agencies to really rip apart what we can or can't achieve in partnership with East Sussex Highways, East Sussex County Council, and look at what we can do short term this year to assist with managing those concerns, risks and issues, and what we can do longer term next year. And she talked about a lot of those elements around park and ride, road closures. We're still in the process of exploring longer term road closures, and various other elements were discussed, which Deborah, I know you talked about a lot in relation to potential one-way routes around the local area, which I'm sure Dad will touch on a bit later on. So we've gone through all the points that were raised through John via the parish, through members of the public, looked at all of those elements and gone, okay, great idea, great concept, what are the pros and cons? Can we achieve it legally? Can we achieve it financially? Financial's never top of the agenda. It may always feel like it, but it really isn't. We look at every element of how we can achieve that goal and whether it is a sustainable gain or not in partnership. And me, Sussex Police, I rest assured, having seen it at its worst, we are doing absolutely everything in our power in order to better that process within the roads networks and the illegal parking. And you should see some visible action that's been taken already across the roads into Camber. We also had a question in relation to, a couple of questions in relation to not seeing police officers. Every red rag day, we will always supply, at the very minimum, a pair of police officers and a pair of PCSOs. So you'll have, from my very small bespoke team that covers 32 parish and ward areas, you will always have on a red rag day, a hot summer's day, you'll always have 2 police officers and 2 PCSOs working a shift. They rarely get off on time and often tick over beyond their hours of which they should be working for all the obvious reasons. They deal with a multitude of different things, from verbal abuse and social behaviour, managing issues between persons that are, fed up with queuing. When you've got 30 to 35,000 people on a beach, tensions are high, especially when families want to get there. They will park 2 miles away and they will do everything they can in their power to gain access. We've seen it in West Wittering in Chichester, we've seen it in Bournemouth, Blackpool, and we've got the same issues up north in Merseyside. We've explored various different issues. One area is looking at a public space protection order in order to deal with the issues around the fines. The issue with that is, if you do bring a public space protection order in, you can only find the car, or you can only find the person, not the car. So you have to physically see the person parking illegally, causing antisocial behaviour, in order to actually find them. It's not something we're going to ever look at here now, but we will absolutely let that run in that area for us to then seek feedback, because they're the first area in the UK conducting that work. Thanet have also brought in a PSPO, which is really interesting and something that's on our radar, and we're looking at very closely. Merseyside have brought in various elements. Folkestone have brought in the park and ride, but again, like Deborah said, that's park and ride into various attractions as opposed to just the beach. And it's about us saying that we're not, we are a partnership. We're not always right. We work tirelessly to get it right. Operation RADCOP is constantly developing, and we're open to suggestions. If there's something that you feel is right, could work, you are the locals, you know the area, you know the roads networks, you know the local farmers, the local fields. Something that Deborah didn't touch on was around, unless I missed it, was around SSI land. There's a lot of SSI land in the local area around Camber. SSI land brings about it various issues in terms of being able to submit cars for parking. So it's specific scientific interest land, which would need specific permission for us to be able to park on. And even if we got that permission, which is very difficult to say the least, you would have to have precautions and provisions put in place, such as mesh flooring go down on the fields. It's not as easy as like a boot fair where you just drive onto a field, park up, jump on a bus and come across. And a whole host of issues that we've been exploring. We've spoken to multiple farmers, multiple landowners, of which they're all SSI land, unless I'm wrong, Deborah. I think the ones that we've spoken to are SSI lands. And also we need to look at what resolutions we can bring into next year, as well as today's longer term gain. And we know what works elsewhere. We've explored what works elsewhere. We've explored what other people are doing, and we will continue to do that. And we are driving that partnership forward, and we look forward to any comments that you may have that will support that. But we know there are some things with elements within the road networks that we need to find some solutions with.
You're on mute, Deborah. I was going to say thank you.
Sorry.
I'll back to you for traffic congestion and parking issues, or is it someone else going to talk about that?
Sorry, can I just come back, Sally Ann, to Chris Farrell? He mentioned the SSI fields, and some of them might be impacted by SSI, others may not. The farmer I spoke to on the A259 did mention the SSI aspect, but the other Broomhill side might be a different matter. So there's a mixture of land on that situation. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. I know in the agenda we've got traffic congestion and parking issues. I don't know if they've been covered or whether they're going to be covered specifically. I know that we've had discussions from you, from Chris, and from Dan. Is that right?
I think Dale is going to talk us through some diversions. Some of the questions we were asked were about one-way road closures and diversions that might be considered. And I think Dale is going to talk us through some of that. And Dan, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll pass over to Dale then.
Hello, good evening. I'm Dale Poor. I'm the Head of Highway Infrastructure Services for the County Council. So my remit is largely around maintenance of the highway network. Anything to do with, I'm sure you're familiar with potholes, cutting grass, emptying drains, street lights that don't work, those sorts of things. So that's my general job, really, making sure the network is maintained in a safe condition and is available for use. also includes things like managing the network in terms of utility works and our own works as well. So making sure they're managed and coordinated in an appropriate way. And other things like putting in new infrastructure as well. So where there are things like putting in bus lanes or cycle lanes or new traffic light junctions, those sorts of things, that also comes under my remit in terms of delivery. In relation to traffic management, a bit like Chris, I mean, we have to work within the kind of legislation, I'm afraid, that's available to us, and that limits what we can do. So, although it seems relatively simple to close a road, as Chris was saying, because there appears to be an issue with it, we can only do it in specific circumstances, and therefore that's generally in relation to what we call temporary traffic regulation orders, which are generally used for our own works or utility work. So, if we need to close the road to carry out works because it's impossible for traffic to flow past it, then we'll use a temporary traffic regulation order. Obviously, sometimes we use temporary lights as well, because we can still allow the traffic to flow, we just need to control it. And then there are traffic regulation orders, which are permanent traffic regulation orders, which are things like Dan's referred to, parking regulations, those sorts of things. So double yellow lines, keep clear boxes, all those kind of things, stop lines at traffic junctions, that they're covered by permanent traffic regulation orders. And that's what's available to us, I think. And so I think I've only just joined the group probably quite recently, and although I worked in East Sussex and highways for a long time, so I'm familiar with a lot of the issues at Camber, certainly. But I think we've recently taken some more updated legal advice. I think in the past there has been a reluctance to potentially use some of the legislation, like a temporary traffic regulation order, to put in a road closure for an event like that happens at Camber on sunny days, because our belief, and I think the advice we've had previously in the past, is that's not an appropriate use, because they tend to be, you have to specify a specific time when the road is closed and then opened again. More recent legal advice, this has come from largely from West Sussex, who have been looking at the same issues in relation to their beaches. And they've sought advice from council as well, is that actually it is probably appropriate for us to use temporary traffic regulation orders to close the road for these unpredictable but and one-off events, or which occur several times during the year, but we just can't predict exactly when they're going to happen. But unfortunately, there is a time frame attached to that. We have to go through a process in order to put that temporary traffic regulation order in place. And that takes a little bit of time. There's a certain amount of consultation that needs to be done with that as well. So even if it was for our own works, if we were closing the road to carry out maintenance works, we have to go through the same process. It still takes us 8 to 10 weeks to get that temporary traffic regulation order in place. There are also other things you need to consider about putting in place road closures. Is obviously, where do we close the road from and to, and what is the impact on the network when we close that road? Where do we divert that traffic to? If we close the road at one end of Camber, where do we then divert it to go to the other end of Camber, when in fact that road is also closed, so there is no access? Because obviously diversions are usually just to take traffic around a closure in relation to maintenance works. And obviously, therefore, we need to work with partners like Highways England, because the A259 is their network, not ours. And obviously, in fact, the other end of Camber Road comes out in Kent. So we need to work with our partners in Kent as well to agree what that looked like. There are other issues as well about closing the road at those points, which are things like how do you manage then and vet the traffic that's trying to enter Camber on those days when the road is closed. Things like residents obviously still need access to the village. People who are based at the Pontins or the holiday park still need access to the village. They may have visitors on that day, so how do you allow those access, and yet somehow not allow access to people that are just coming to Camber for the day because it's a nice sunny day? And you have to kind of try and manage that at the point at which the road is closed. So that takes quite a bit of thinking about, and a bit of resources, I think, to understand how that will work. So I think there are some challenges in doing it. What I think we've been looking at in RADCOP is looking at potentially looking at putting in a temporary traffic regulation order to close the road on those red rag days for next year. Unfortunately, we won't make it for this season, as I say, because there's a process for us to go through. And therefore we won't make this summer season. But I think that would possibly then give us some good learning, some good understanding about how that will work if we implemented it next year. And then potentially we could look at introducing possibly a permanent traffic regulation order we could use, which you can then use to switch on and off as you need it for those red rag days. Because I think you'd need some learning from that temporary traffic regulation order in order to implement a permanent order. The difference as well between a permanent and a temporary one is that the permanent order requires a much broader, wider consultation exercise because it is a permanent order, which is not easy just to undo once you've done it, so to speak. So it does require a broader kind of consultation, and therefore that tends to take more time. In typical timeframes to introduce permanent traffic regulation orders are something like 18 to 24 months, because, as I say, the amount of consultation and feedback and then adjustments you have to make to that order. So I think we have been discussing and looking at introducing a temporary traffic regulation order for next year, and then that would help us understand how that will work and potentially feed into a permanent regulation order at a later date. There are I think there's some ideas have been talked about as well in relation to one-way systems. Again, if the question is, can you use the regulations to introduce a one-way system you can turn on and off on red rag days? I think we could probably now apply the same principle, but I think you then have some complications about how you would do that, logistics of literally turning off a one-way system on a red rag day at fairly short notice. Because it needs to be very clearly signed, it needs to be safe as a one-way system, and therefore you need a lot of signs, a lot of work to be done to implement that one-way system at fairly short notice, and then you've got to take it all down again as well. So one-way systems appear to be quite attractive, but they are probably quite complex to implement on a temporary basis. I think the only other thing is, I think there's also been a discussion about a local one-way system around the village itself, which again I think is something that we are looking at and continue to look at. And there was certainly some elements of pluses about those, but I think again there are some equal negatives as well. So there seems to be, as I say, there's quite often these things seem to be relatively simple ideas and to implement, but in reality they can become quite complex at the end of the day. To actually understand it. So I think there's quite a bit of work needs to be done in order to kind of really understand and then implement the right sort of solution that will support the teams on those red rag days and try and help manage the traffic within the village. I think that's pretty much covered. I think most of the points I want to talk about. Thank you, Sally-Ann.
Thank you very much. I noticed Rupert Court's got his hand up. We're going to take questions at the end, Rupert, if that's all right. Thank you, Dale. Does Dan Clark have anything to add to that? Probably not. I know you've just spoken, Dan, but
yeah, nothing to add. It was just there was a few questions around permit restrictions or restrictions within the residential areas. I was just going to say that there is on the East Sussex parking pages on the website. There's a request a restriction electronic form to fill out. That's open to anybody to fill out to request any kinds of restrictions within the roads, within any roads, within Camber or elsewhere. And I'd really encourage people to do that.
Okay, thank you. Deborah's wanting to come in on that.
Yes, thank you, Sally-Ann, and thank you, Dale and Dan, for your input there. I just wanted to add that the road traffic safety team also looked into posts and bollards being installed along the verges to stop verge parking, and I know that was a popular question that has been asked and comes up on a regular basis. And as they say, and I'm reading it from their report here, this issue has also been looked at in the past. To be effective at preventing vehicles parking on a grass verge, post bollards would need to be provided with a maximum distance between posts of about 1.5 metres to stop vehicles passing through them to park behind. Experience has also shown that any post bollards need to be of a solid construction and securely fixed into the verge to prevent them being removed or knocked over. The issues that would need to be considered before any post bollards are installed include the extent where we would need to put the bollards to be ensure they're effective, the type of bollards used, how they are fixed, drilled, fitted with soil compaction or concrete, which has environmental concerns, how they reflect on unlit roads and posts and bollards, and how they might block driver visibility. In other words, safety considerations, visibility from accesses to junctions, there are ways to mitigate that visibility by setting posts, bollards back from the road edge to facilitate appropriate sight lines for the speed of approaching traffic. But as I'm sure you can all imagine, this will, however, dilute its deterrent effect because people could park in front of it. Very short posts could be utilised, but larger SUV-style vehicles would just park over the top of them. So, you know, all these things need to be considered. Impact in terms of verge maintenance, got to cut the grass around it. Well, hey, never mind about that, maybe, you might say. The potential of road safety of solid posts, because it is quite a high-speed carriageway. We are aware, or the road safety traffic people are aware, that this road is frequently used by motorcyclists, and any impact between a motorcyclist and a solid roadside feature could potentially lead to serious injury. National passive safety guidance requires that structures adjacent to the highway need to be deformable in the case of a collision to lessen the impact on occupants and riders. Posts, bollards installed within the verge may actually encourage drivers to park in the road further on, further into the road, that is, just adding to the congestion. These are all things that the traffic people have said to us they have experienced in other areas, and they are things to be considered. It's not necessarily to say that we couldn't do the bollards, but it's just pointing out the pitfalls, because it seems to people like myself it could be a good answer, but it's not necessarily the way. So I just wanted to add that in. Thank you, Sally Ann.
Deborah, I would just say that we wouldn't need bollards if we had double yellow lines down the roads, because cars can't park on the verges behind the double yellow line. So I think that's something, Daniel Clark, that we really need to think about, putting more double yellow lines there in order to deter cars from parking on the verges. And then there is an offence, an illegal parking offence to actually, you know, deal with. But that's something we need to think about. So going on to the poster campaign, John Bradford, I think you're going to go through the fantastic campaign that the Parish Council, you, my office and Rother District Council have been doing. Community campaign, Our Beach, Your Beach, Our Home. Do you want to just go through that?
I will do, Sally Ann, very quickly, because I'm conscious that some questions are going to be taken this evening. Well, it was at your instigation in 2020 when residents found chaotic traffic, parking, crowding, litter, antisocial behaviour in Camber, that you invited myself and two residents to strive to try and create a common theme for important messaging to residents, the visitors and holidaymakers. What we decided we could do is to try to engage them in caring for the village and the area as much as we as residents do, by promoting important messages about litter, beach safety, respect and consideration towards others, and tackling antisocial behaviour, parking issues, and having greater social responsibility. Basically, we wanted to promote people to be polite, kind, thoughtful, tidy and safe. And we used the strap line. We engaged a graphic designer who came up with tremendous work, which both Rother District Council, East Sussex Council, County Council and the police signed off as being suitable. The strapline, Our Beach, Your Beach, Our Home, was intended for people to consider their behaviour when they came here. Treat Camber as you do your own. We did this in partnership with Camber Community Group, who produce the newsletter every month, and raised £2,000 to pay for the design work, with grants from Pontin's Nisa store, the Jempsons Foundation and store, and the Gallivant Hotel. And as I say, she designed a very good approach to this messaging. Highways adopted the theme for their Park Kindly campaign, which is posted around the roads in the village and the accesses to the beach. Visitors' sense of responsibility in Camber has not improved, I'm afraid, as has been mentioned earlier in the evening by others here. We still have illegal parking, antisocial behaviour, verbal abuse, threats, and even a number of fights in the village between residents and our visitors. But it isn't, as Chris says, unique to Camber, but it is as tantamounts to a national epidemic about litter, antisocial behaviour and parking. We do need to accept that to effect change will be a long-term educational process, which will require national as well as our own local and regional approaches. Our beach campaign hopes to nudge people into remembering their personal responsibilities and behaviour, and it doesn't seem to be working at the moment, but we're not going to drop it. We think these constant reminders and educational process must continue and will be supported by the residents. Mainly, the posters are being used electronically on the social media to some effect, and been widely greeted by residents. There has been some cynicism about it. You probably know that if you read the Facebook or any of the social messages, you'll get our residents say, these people can't read, they don't give a damn about us. But we're not going to give up on it. We will continue the campaign in the future months as well. That's about it, I think, Sally-Ann.
Thank you, John. And I know that we've discussed, you and Deborah and Lizzie Hacking and Paul Osborne and Keith, we've discussed other measures that perhaps could be put in place for specific public space protection orders that can deal with antisocial behaviour and antisocial parking that I know could be considered, a levy that could be introduced on the parking charges or introduced via a business improvement district or tourism business improvement district, a levy on tourism in order to pay for, perhaps when you look at Bournemouth, for example, last year they employed around the clock security patrols, 75 new beach wardens were employed, and they've got a coastal business improvement district, so they obviously charge a levy on visitors coming in, whether they're staying or parking. So I think, you know, there are things that we could look at, and I know that Deborah is going to be looking at them. So I think that's important to highlight that everything, we are trying to think of every single way, and that's at national legislation on increasing parking fines, etc., of trying to mitigate the issues in Camber. And I've also raised the antisocial behaviour with ministers in Parliament, and they've all noticed an increase in this awful lack of respect. I've written about it in, you know, Observer articles. I've highlighted it in Parliament. It is actually quite shocking how people treat other people, residents in places they come to visit. Camber is not alone in this. So just to be rest assured that we are trying, it almost sometimes like banging our heads against a brick wall. I mean, what can you do with people who just don't care? And that's the upsetting thing. It is really upsetting. Rupert, you've got a question.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, you're right. It's the problem is the people, and yeah, it is like banging your head against a wall many times. Yeah, a couple of questions. One, obviously, we've been talking about it actually in the chat, so obviously some people might have seen if they're on the YouTube meeting, obviously regarding the current post that we have as we enter the village, obviously, which is in the 30-mile-an-hour section. These seem to be effective when they are all there. Many of them have been damaged and removed, which means kind of for most of the summer cars have been parking behind them. It's just a free space to park. And then also the entrance to the cycle route to Rye is a nice tarmac entrance, which the other day everyone realised was also a good way to get behind the bollards. First, I wondered if these could be continued in the state that they are. They work quite well. Obviously, with some kind of small bollard placed in that cycle route that obviously doesn't block the cyclists. That's obviously something we don't want to stop. We try and encourage them much better. And the other was, Christopher, you mentioned an event. If there was an event that you had different rules with what you could do regarding closing the road, is this something that we could put on? So have a specified event that, even if it was just on paper, which we could then use to close the roads. That's all.
Who would you like to go first? That's my question.
Shall I? I could probably give you a little bit of an answer, Rupert, on the posts. I mean, I'm happy to, I think, consider replacing posts that are missing, and that's part of my remit. That's not a problem necessarily. My understanding, though, and I might be wrong, is that they are quite special posts. They're made of a particular special wood. I don't know if it's some sort of oak. And that's where I have a problem, because my maintenance budget doesn't stretch to special wood. It stretches to standard posts, if you see what I mean. So I'm happy to consider replacing them, and maybe have a conversation with the parish if they want to want particular types of posts contribute towards the cost or something. I would say that's not a problem. Certainly happy as well to look at maybe putting some sort of post at the entrance to the cycleway. Although I think, again, that probably needs to just a bit of thinking about, because I'm a cyclist, a very keen cyclist, and I'm not that keen on having posts in the cycleway, you know what I mean? Because you tend to bump into them if you're not paying attention, or it's dark.
Yeah, just as the other end of the cycleway towards where it kind of opens up at an entrance by one of the lakes, it just has another one of those similar wooden posts that you use.
Okay.
Yeah, obviously I didn't realise they were special posts, but yeah, maybe perhaps we could look at some other ones in with the parish.
Okay, well, so happy to have that conversation with the parish about that.
Yeah, thanks.
Chris.
Sorry, Rupert, I was tapping away trying to answer everyone's questions there. Can you just repeat your question again very briefly? I've been answering them in the comments.
Yeah, sure. So obviously you mentioned that obviously you've got the restrictions on the closing the road, and that it sounds like.
Oh, your question was around events, wasn't it, Rupert?
Yeah, and obviously on previous years
how we
back
can
when I worked at
yeah, that's right. How can we manoeuvre the legislation?
Yeah, exactly that, pretty much. So obviously we used to close the road much earlier.
Yeah.
In all honesty, not very easily. So if you look at, I mean, feel free to go away and look at TEN's notice and numbers and what we would need to achieve and the risks and the insurance policies. Anybody that's ever run an event knows that it goes to a process, legally goes to a process called a SAG, which is a safeguard and action group. That action group basically sets actions for the owner of that event, and that owner of the event has a whole host of hoops legally to jump through in order to meet the objectives for that event to be signed off or not, in terms of that notice being agreed if it's 499 people or less, or an even more intensive process if it's over that. That includes the purchase of insurance policies, that include road traffic management plans through traffic consultants. It's tough. It's a great concept, Rupert. I always like a workaround, if I'm being completely honest. I'm very much a type of person that likes a bit of innovation, and anything that we can think of that will help us. And we have thought about this time and time again. We've explored multiple other areas, and we can't say yes or no to an event. That process has to run. So if somebody wants to submit a notice, like we've said to many people in the past ever, haven't we? If someone wants to submit a notice for an event at any period, they can. They're within the rights to do that, and that can go across for a decision. And then it'll go across for the whole SAG process and then the legal process in terms of management. But it's not an easy process. So yes, in theory, it could be a workaround, but one that you'd all have to really rack your brains at in relation to whether it's something that you want to take on or not, or submit. And it's not always going to be agreed. I might be wrong, Deborah, but because of the risks that Camber Sands brings and the area brings in terms of visitors, water safety, the inquests that we've had in the past for the tragic deaths that we had on the beach, where I was working neighbour policing in a different role then when that happened. They very rarely, if ever, get accepted as an agreed event, which is often what we say to people when they want to come and put large music events on the beach. And that's kind of what I've been doing the last 3 days, working tirelessly to prevent a unlicensed music event from landing in Camber. So I've been working long days to prevent that from happening. So what I would say is, yes, anything's possible. Do I think it will work? Probably not, if I'm being completely blunt. But great concept, great idea, and I love the innovation. Brilliant work, Rupert. Keep it coming. One of them will win. One of them will be a winner.
Deborah, did you want to add to that before we go to Angela Alexander, who's got a question?
Yes, thank you. Yes, as Chris says, a very good idea, Rupert. We have thought about that. I believe West Wittering, which is a private beach and a private road, have even explored having an event that they can control and that sort of thing. As a council, this is an event. It's not really an event because it's an open beach, but and they weren't allowed to legally. So I understand the legal issues are saying this is a public beach. You can't have an event. You know, the village, we can't call it an event as a council. It is an open public beach. So yeah, it has been explored, but a great idea and something we can perhaps consider again in the future.
But would the fact that it's an event, it wouldn't make any difference to the fact that if we had road closures, which that might make the ability to close the roads easier, it's still going to throw the problems onto Lydd, Winchelsea Beach, Pet Level. Yes, yeah. That's the trouble, isn't it?
You're right.
Yeah.
I mean, Deborah and I, we talked about this over and over again, that you have to, and Deborah mentioned it at the beginning, you have to bring things in together, otherwise it doesn't work. And I know nationally, when you look at solutions to, I mean, let's be really, really, really blunt, because I'm a police officer, we talk quite, you know, extremely straight down the line. We cannot physically manage that many cars illegally parking in Camber with the resources that we have, fact. So we've been working in a task and finish group to look at resolution solutions, including innovative ideas like Rupert's, which is brilliant, of being able to...
Or a tourism levy to pay for more enforcement officers.
Yeah, absolutely. But even then, that would be absolutely exceptional. But even then, you still, like Highways England, East Sussex Highways will say, rightly, if you've got large numbers coming to an area, it's very hard to predict on the beach, but you have to put them somewhere, which is why Park and Ride has been explored in other areas. It's been taken up in some and not others. I read Merseyside to you, they haven't taken it up. But you have to push the traffic. Traffic has to go somewhere. They've come down predominantly from London. They've got families, most of these people, in the beach or friends. They want to land on a beach. They want to have fun. They want to enjoy the sunshine. So they're going to go somewhere. So by putting a road closure in, and I drove through London. I drove to London to Kings with my son the other day, and I went through a couple of villages. And when I went through the villages, there were signs in every single house saying, "No more road closures. Stop diverting traffic for our villages." And the reality is that, like anything, if you put one solution in, you could cause another problem. And yeah, absolutely. And the reality is that we need to come up with a solution that doesn't just push the problem, it resolves it for everybody. And we're working tirelessly to do that, having conversations in relation to Park and Ride, which, you know, it is very much a next year long-term solution if we can achieve it, but one that we're working tirelessly. We meet so regularly in partnership to talk about Camber, but there are other coastal areas that are busy. When we did our analytical data product, Camber Sands was the second most complained of area in Rother for parking issues and road congestion. The second, not the first, the second most complaints in Rother district. So we've got to bear in mind that we have to resolve and resolve these issues. Fact, I came out on a red rag weekend, I was appalled by the behaviour, and we're not where we need to be in managing the road networks. We're not. We know that, we're not hiding from that. All the partners are saying the same thing, which is why we're sitting in task and finish groups to resolve this issue. Which is why I've invited Peter to come out and join me in a high-vis jacket with visitor plastered across his back, and see the issues firsthand, the risks and issues, and be able to feed that back to you all as a community. We're open, transparent. We want you to see what we're doing. We want you to come up with innovative solutions. So please keep them coming, because we may not have thought about them. Go and explore stuff. If you see stuff that you see in a news article from another area, and you think, wow, what a great idea, that wasn't mentioned, tell us. Because we are working tirelessly to be able to resolve issues like every other coastal strip in the UK.
Thank you, Chris. Angela, you've got a question.
Thank you, Sally Ann. Less of a question and more of a bit of information, because I've been around a long time, and it's about the posts. So the two sets of posts in Camber, the taller posts, which are made of tannalised wood along the verges, they were put in as an initiative by the parish council with approval from East Sussex County Council, and Brian Banks was the person at Highways at the time. The shorter posts that are at the far western end of the village on the Farm Lane side, which are the oak posts, the shorter posts, They were put in as part of the Camber Visitor Management Initiative strategy, probably just over 20 years ago. And that was a scheme that was designed by the Landscape Architect Department of East Sussex County Council. There was a chap called Nigel Marshall at the time that was around. The parish council weren't keen on those posts because they felt they were too short, and they have been taken out, for want of a better word, quite a few times over the years because of cars driving into them because they literally don't see them. The county council at the time when they were put in, because the parish council raised their concerns that they weren't going to last, agreed to keep a stock of those, which they said that they would replace. Now, as I said, just over 20 years ago, so whether that agreement is still standing or not, I don't know. But part of that design scheme was that there was a post at the end of the cycle path to do exactly what Rupert said and to prevent cars going down there. And the best person to ask for experience of that is County Councillor Keith Glazier, who used to live in a house on the outskirts of Camber adjoining the cycle path, and somebody took out the post that was at the end. There was a line of traffic right past the water sports centre in front of Keith's house. He couldn't actually get out of his drive and had to drive across the marsh to get where he was going on one particular hot, sunny Sunday afternoon. So good person to get a bit of information from there. But that's the history around the posts. And as I say, it goes back quite a long time. It worked until people started pulling the posts out and, as has been said, driving behind them and parking there.
Thank you, Angela. Richard Byam has got a question. Are you on mute, Richard? I know you're there. You're on mute.
Okay, on road closures. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. On road closures and the effect on residents, one has to take into account emergency vehicles and inevitable events, people going into labour, people having heart attacks and that sort of thing. What would be the situation if there were road closures and prevented emergency vehicles getting access?
Who wants to take that, Dale? Chris?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of if we had a road closure in place through a temporary regulation order or a permanent one, I mean, obviously we always allow access for emergency vehicles, whatever the situation.
Clearly, the way the traffic is backed up on the roads, sometimes that would impede their progress to reach their destination.
That's a different situation. I mean, the road closure itself, as I say, we'd allow access, but if there was any problem with cars parked on the road and not and there wasn't access available, that's a different situation.
Okay.
The only other question I'd like to quickly raise, and this is probably slightly cynical, but we were talking about a one-way system maybe going around. Would that also affect the copious number of agricultural traffic? I mean, I'm from Essex, and until I moved here, I thought we had a lot of agricultural traffic on our roads in Essex, but nothing compared with here. And how would the agricultural traffic circumnavigate this whole route around Camber and Lydd and wherever if they were forced into a one-way system?
I think that's a good question, Richard. One of the things I said, I think, is you have to really think about when you implement these kind of things as to what the impact is on the community. Wouldn't be just agricultural vehicles, people leaving their properties who wanted to maybe head west, might have to actually head east first on a long diversion to get to where they want to go to. So I think that's what I say, you have to really think about it and implement something that actually can work.
And works for our residents. I know that they have to come first because, you know, these visitors have got to.
Thank you, Sally.
Really.
I couldn't agree more, Sally Ann. Thank you.
Deborah, you wanted to add something in there. You're on mute.
It's late in the day. I'm sorry. I've been here over 12 hours now, so it's. I'm sorry.
Deborah,
I'm sorry. My brain's gone. But I was just wanting to support what Richard was saying. He's absolutely raised the issues. There is no easy answer. A one-way system, road closures will impact, as Chris said earlier, somewhere. And I do remember last year, some people, residents saying, never again, never close the road again. It was just awful. We could not get anywhere. on the A259. It was just awful. And in terms of the emergency services, if we do a diversion, one of the diversions was something like 18 kilometres long. So the ambulance or whatever might be able to get in more quickly, but getting out is still going to take them longer. So again, all that needs to be considered. A shorter diversion, a longer diversion. I don't think Dale quite mentioned it, but there was a shorter diversion just within Old Lyd Road and that area. But you'd then have goods and tractors and agricultural things trundling through the village and out the other side. So whatever we do, there is a knock-on impact which needs to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. And I think there's no more questions. Oh, here we go. Kuros Sasha would like to ask a question. And then I think we need to wrap up.
Thank you, Sally. Thanks, everybody. You're all putting in a great effort, I see. The issue for us, and I represent the residents of a small group of houses on Old Lyd Road. So we're really at the epicentre of the antisocial sort of side of the behaviour, but also the parking issues. And having lived there now myself, you know, for over 10 years, and it's not as long as many people have, but the problem seems to me to be one of supply and demand, and it's really around the vehicle sort of side of parking, and the fact that there just isn't enough parking in Camber. Now, I'm not to satisfy all the visitors on very, very busy days. I think a lot of what we've been talking about is infrastructural works that can be very expensive to implement, and then just, you know, within a couple of years it's useless or it doesn't work and stuff like that. So we can be spending our own money and wasting it, really, in my opinion. The key thing for me then is really understanding the demand of parking and the supply of parking. And it seems to me that the issues have been improved a little by improving the parking outside of the town. And if we can get people to obviously use better, you know, more sustainable modes of transport as well, like the buses and you know, local bus system, etc., and cycling, it's great. But ultimately, most people arrive in Camber with 2 kids in the back seat and you know, some, you know, parasols and stuff that you just cannot lift, you know, take on a bus necessarily. So for me, I'd really like to see us explore the options of using land outside Camber's village so that people arrive there first. We then improve the routes to the beach and perhaps create some sort of system whereby they can get there more easily. I think that would also help free up some of the smaller car parks that we have in the centre of Camber for use by people who really need them, like those who are disabled, those who are particularly elderly who may need, you know, local drop-off. And I believe that was a solution that was presented in one of the analyses of the SPG that was done quite a number of years ago now by Arabs, which seems to have sort of almost been forgotten. But I appreciate it needed a big amount of money to make it sort of work, and a development partner. But I think if we get this parking issue resolved, whereby huge numbers of cars can very quickly and easily get into very, very large spaces, and also spread out the facilities ultimately along the beach as well, that there is enough capacity in this area, both in terms of land and beach, to cater for up to people say up to 20,000 people on a busy day. And I just think that to me is the, you know, from all my years of experiencing it, seems to be like the main issue. I have my own personal thoughts about pedestrianising Old Lyd Road, even temporarily. Low traffic networks, love them, hate them. I personally hate them in London, but I think they have certain value, and it may be something that we may trial perhaps on a weekend to only let certain people through. But it seems to me like the management of Camber and the traffic just seems to be on the shoulders of a very few people, and it's now spreading to the wider community, and as such, you know, the result is this meeting, for which I'm very grateful, incidentally. So that's all I just wanted to say, is that parking, I think if you solve the parking issue, a lot of the other problems of antisocial behaviour will go away, because people come here they sit in that queue and they get angry and their kids get fed up and they come out of that car, and if they can't find somewhere to park, they go ballistic. And so imagine would you if you've driven 3.5 hours from London or Kent or somewhere else. So I do think that's the issue, and I'd be very happy to help in any way I can, looking for a solution.
Deborah. Thank you, Kyros.
Yeah, thank you, Kyros. Yes, I'm not on mute. Good. Some very good points, and absolutely, if I could build a multi-storey car park, Kyros, and thought that would be the answer to all our problems, I'd do it tomorrow. I tell you what, I live and sleep Camber Sands. I go home tonight and I wake up in the middle of the night sweating. What is happening this weekend? I do, believe you me, I'm dedicated, and I've got a whole area to look after, so I can't just keep to Camber Sands. But if I could make the problem at Camber Sands go away, you're on. I'm in there, folks. But and if I thought a multi-storey car park or fields or parking or park and ride would solve the problem, that would be great. But I really remain to be convinced, because ultimately I do not want 100,000 people on that beach, because that beach is not safe for that number of people. You've only got two accesses, Kyros. You've only got an access from Camber Central Car Park, or you've got an access over the dunes, which is Triple SI, owned by Sussex County Council, remember, from Western Car Park. Yeah, if we could helicopter people in or bring them in from the River Rother or somewhere else, and I believe that has been explored in the past as well, a bridge over the River Rother and bring people in that end, because people tend to crowd in these bubbles around the access points because they're coming with their children, they're carrying lots of heavy stuff, their picnics, their barbecues, the buckets and spades and all that we've talked about, and they want to sit down at the nearest point. So they want to park at the nearest space. They don't want to get on a park and ride unless they really, really have to. So, yeah, I absolutely agree with you. It would be great to make the parking issue go away and park off-road and solve the problem of, congestion and parking outside people's houses and on the verges. I absolutely agree with that. It would be wonderful. But I really don't think parking spaces and additional parking is a good and safe answer, I'm afraid, in this situation. But we will explore the park and ride, and if we can get a road closure so that people have no choice, having sat in a queue for 3 hours and travelled all the way from London or wherever with screaming children in the back of their car, and they have no other option to go and park on a field off the A259, maybe that might work, and we get hundreds of buses. I think I worked out to get 10,000 people down to Camber Sands. I don't know, we'd need about 50 buses sitting there every day to bring them in and bring them back. Maybe that might work. I don't know. I don't have all the answers.
I don't think that would work.
No.
I don't think that would work. I think my point was that parking is the root of a lot of the problems, and I think to have some kind of agreement over that would be acknowledgement of that would be great.
So are you thinking, Kyros, that we'll have to wrap up? I know Stephen's got a question too, but presumably you're saying don't let the traffic into Camber, have the parking on the outside and not have the car parks in the village. Is that what you're saying?
Not exactly. I'm saying let's look at the capacity and build the capacity and the access routes if they are required with the car parking facilities, and I'm not saying multi-storey, and I don't think and I don't think buses will solve the problem either. This is just, we're talking about a little bit of icing on the cake there, the buses and the cycle routes. Most people arrive by car, and I think a transport assessment would very, very quickly identify how many car parking spaces you need.
We've done that.
And I just
in the transport impact survey, we did that in 2017. So that's available if you want to have a look at it. Yeah. Deborah, I think is it online or can it be sent?
I don't think it's online, but I have a very battered copy of it that I can share, I'm sure. Yes.
Yeah, that might be worth making that available to John or Angela at the parish council so that people can have a look at that, because that's quite useful. Okay, I'm just going to move on to Stephen Coles and then Angela, who can come in. Stephen, you've been waiting to ask a question, and then we're going to really wrap this up after Angela has spoken. Stephen.
Thank you. Good evening. Hopefully I'm not on mute.
No, you're not. We can hear you loud and clear.
My first go at this. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody who's commented tonight. And I'm not familiar with all the names, but particularly the head of the police service. Sir, I don't know who you are, but I've been most impressed by your passion and your detail and your intelligence to all the problems that we face here. I know that many people, including Sally Ann and the parish council, have tried for decades to solve the problems that Camber has, and it's not through a lack of effort, and it's not a criticism of any individual or any individual organisation. I'm a lifelong Camber visitor, and I've been a full-time resident here for coming on for 20 years. What I've observed, particularly in the last 5, is an exponential increase in visitors. It's not just down to COVID. It's down to a number of factors, including publicity, the internet, the fact that this hidden gem has become wider and wider known, and visitor numbers have been climbing gradually. What I see is that we are gaining not only in popularity, but we're gaining in erosion. By erosion, I mean erosion of the way of life here, erosion of civilized behavior, erosion of the sand dunes, erosion of everything that actually makes this place unique, special, and people want to visit it. And actually, if we don't take some drastic action pretty soon, there won't be a Camber Sands that people actually want to visit. And my concern is that whilst everyone in this meeting has great intentions, ultimately your hands are tied because you're one individual with one point of action. And I don't know how this group can actually really affect the changes that are needed. So I guess it's a general question to the person highest up the chain, which I guess at this point is Sally Ann. Sally, you've been a member of Parliament in this area for a number of years.
No, just 18 months actually, Stephen.
Okay, well, you've certainly caught my eye. I read with passion. I read with great interest. I actually read it 3 times, your piece in the community newsletter recently. And I'll be honest, I'm not a Tory voter. I have been in the past, but I haven't been in recent decades. And I was genuinely moved by the clear undercurrent of your passion and how you feel about this place, and it was refreshing for me to hear that, shall we say?
Thank you.
I've been working a bit like Kouros because we live in the same development. I mean, I'm a full-time resident here. Kouros is a weekend resident, but he has worked with passion to keep this place as beautiful as it was at the start and make it more beautiful. And I'm keen, along with a lot of other residents here, to do the same. I've been quiet for the last 5 years since my return from China because I've been observing. But I'm in the process of compiling my own assessment of what I believe are the Camber's problems and how to resolve them. I think Kouros does have some valid points. I think additional parking outside of this village is a solution. I think it is viable. I don't think hundreds of buses are needed. I think what's needed is, quite simply, is to restrict the number of people who come here. It's really that simple. We are a finite area. We have a finite number of spaces for people to sit safely, particularly with COVID rules. And we should be acting as a group of individuals, as a group of authorities, in order to put changes in place to manage that. It is about public safety. I personally have spent hours on busy days and non-busy days maintaining traffic flow in this village. An unpaid traffic manager. I have witnessed people only last weekend queuing for the car parks at 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, I get up very early because I do business with Asia. And I've witnessed people queuing for the car parks at 3 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. I have witnessed the car parks not be open until almost 9 o'clock in the morning, by which time Old Lyd Road alone is gridlocked in both directions. On June 13th, I managed that road for 4.5 hours before anyone turned up. And the only reason they were even able to get there was because I'd kept the road open. That's not my job. I'm a resident here. That's not my job. I shouldn't have to manage the traffic in my own road in order that my partner and I can get in and out of our home. It's really that simple. there should be some system in place whereby the police, if it is the police, have the authority to simply either close the road and divert traffic anywhere else, because we're not open for business. If we're not opening car parks until 8 o'clock in the morning, why are cars allowed to come into this village at all and start a traffic jam at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning?
Okay.
Park and ride is a solution. Pedestrianising parts of Camber is a solution. So are lots and lots of other good ideas that I'm sure other people have had. It all comes down to one thing and one thing alone, and that is money. And until the money is allocated to this area to solve its problems, we will not solve them. And that's not down to the people in this meeting today. It's higher up the chain. And we all know that. It all comes down to money. The only way to resolve this is to spend money. Now, COVID has shown us that when we have to, as a country, as a political organisation, we can all come together. Multiple agencies from all over the world can work almost overnight and resolve a problem when the money is affected. Well, it's time to affect the money. So
I think, Stephen, I think you raised some valid points, but I also think it comes down to public behaviour as well, and the behaviour of people. So I think I agree with you, it is, and I think that's something we can take forward. Just to let you know, I've become the new chair of the all-party parliamentary group for coastal communities. So it is something that we can do an inquiry on this traffic problem in our coastal communities, and I really want to push that, because I know we're not the only place to have serious traffic issues. As Chris said, somewhere up, where was it? Up in the Merseyside somewhere. And we've got Bournemouth. There are loads of places that have got this issue. So it is something we can really focus on. And by doing an inquiry through an all-party parliamentary group, that can feed it up to government and affect change, hopefully, if it's possible. OK?
Well, I'd love to see that happen. And I think, sorry, Officer Christopher, I don't know your official title, sir, but it was great to see examples, someone thinking outside the box. My partner is from South Wales, and South Wales, the Gower Peninsula, particularly has very similar associations in terms of visitor numbers, in terms of traffic flow that we have here. And they don't have these levels of problems, and they don't have filthy beaches because they're managed correctly and in a non-bipartisan manner. They're actually joined. There's joined up thinking. There's clear graphics. There's clear information. It's really poignant to the point, and people are looked down upon if they drop their rubbish on the floor. Whereas here we seem to think it's just acceptable that someone else will pick it up for them.
It's
I would
not
advocate.
acceptable.
No, of course it isn't.
No.
Of course
Yeah.
it isn't. I would definitely advocate getting rid of all bins altogether, giving people a plastic bag and say, take your rubbish home. That's what you do if you go on
We've
holiday.
thought of that.
That's what you do if you go on. Yeah, it's all been thought of, but none of it's been. Everything's been thought of, but not enough gets actioned because there's always someone else who says, well, we can't try that because.
Well,
actually,
I think, yeah, I know, Stephen. I'm going to move on to Angela, and then
Please do.
I'm going to wrap this meeting up because I think everyone's had a very long day. Deborah's been on the go for 12 hours. Angela.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate all your
Thank you, Stephen. And that's been taken on board. I'm sure everyone's taken on board your comments and your suggestions. Angela.
Thank you, Sally Ann. And just very quickly, if I remember correctly from when traffic surveys have been done in the past, the problem has always been not enough parking spaces, but as important is getting people off the road and into the parking spaces that are available as quickly as you possibly can, and that's part of keeping that flow going, which is part of the management of getting people off the road. That keeps the traffic flowing through a little better. The other thing that I think, if I read the parish council's feelings correctly, is that we should also be thinking when we're getting people parking, part of the safety of numbers on the beach. I agree, they huddle. They huddle because, yes, they've got their children and they've got their parasols and their cool box and whatever. And one of the reasons they huddle, as well as being close to the car parking, is they're actually close to the loo. Particularly, that's a particular thing if you come for the day. You want to be close to a loo. And that's why we get the other side of the antisocial behaviour of people actually using people's properties for the loo. So I think when we're looking at the bigger picture of spreading people out getting them off the roads, getting them in the car parks, spreading them around the beach. We need to be thinking about that bigger picture of what do they need when they get here. One of those things is actually to go to the loo. So just a small penny point there. Brilliant.
Right. I think that I just want to say thank you to Chris, Deborah, Dan, and oh gosh, Dale. There we go. John and Angela, who's the parish clerk, obviously, of Camber, and to everybody else that has actually attended this, who've attended the meeting, who are here. There's Carol Studley, there's plenty of, there's Councillor Lizzie Hacking and Councillor Paul Osborne. I just want to say thank you to everybody, all the residents who have joined in the meeting, whether it's they're going to be watching it on YouTube or on here, because actually this is your village, this is our community, and the fact that we're all working together to find solutions for this is just brilliant. And I really feel very proud of the village for doing the campaign with the posters and everything. And I feel so relieved that we have actually got a group of people in Deborah, Chris, Dan and Dale and all the people at Rother and East Sussex. They really do care about Camber and the issues in Camber. We all care about that. We're all looking for solutions all the time. So I would plead with all the residents, Stephen Coles there, you had some great points, so did Kuros, just feed in some suggestions, because actually that's what it's about. This is, you know, your beach, our home, and this is why we've got to, you know, try and sort it out. I will do what I can nationally, at national level, and we'll all work together on this as a community. So thank you all really very much. John, I don't know if you want to say a few words before we sign off.
No, I'll then extend the thank you to yourself for chairing the meeting, for Deborah for getting it organised at our request, responding to the residents as they do, for Chris' contribution, Dan and Dale as well. It's very much appreciated. I see the messages are coming up. I'll try and answer some of them on Facebook sites, and I believe many other of the officers that are here tonight will be doing the same. We have 2 ears and we use them for listening. Good night all.
Thank you. Thank you.